Hello everyone. My name is Noor Shifa Nazifa, and I will explain about the introduction. In a democratic state, the electoral process determines who will hold the political office. It is electorate which confers the power to the government and call the governments to the account. If the electorate is to enjoy the true equality in the constitutional participate, it is of a fundamental constitutional importance that the electoral system ensure four principles, which are that there are full franchise that subject to limited restriction, that the value of each vote cast is equal to the every other's vote. The third principle is that the conduct of elections campaign is regulated to ensure the legality and the fairness. And the fourth principle is that the voting system is such as to produce both a legislative body represent of the electorate and governments with sufficient democratic support to be able to govern effectively. It is again these four principles objective that the law must be evaluated. However, it must be recognized that these elements are in a large measure inseparable from each other. Avoid an equal suffrage losses its value if political bosses are able to remender a constituency so as to suit their own interests. There is no point in having an elaborate system of proportional representations if the electors are all driven in one direction by a preponderance of bribes and threats. Legal provisions mean nothing if enforcement is left wholly in the hands of those who profit by breaking it. That is why it's right to speak of the electoral systems. The procedure for the election is systematic in that it's a part are interdependence, it is impossible to advance on one front without regards to others. The current franchise is the right to the vote is defined the Representations of the People that Act 1983 amendment. The prior to enactment of the Representations of the People Act 2000, its eligibility was based solely on residency in the constituency at a qualifying date. The 2000 Act introduced greater flexibility that allowing the registration once resident in a constituency at any dates and supplement the residency requirement with a registration on the register of the parliamentary electors for the constituency. In addition to the residency, a person is eligible to vote once they have made a declaration of a local connection. The right to vote is linked to citizenship, resident and entered on the electoral register. Under the Section 1 of the Representation of the People Act 1983, which is amendment, a person is eligible to vote in the parliamentary election if he or she is 18 years old at the date of the elections. It is a British citizen as a Commonwealth citizen who has the right to remain in the United Kingdom as a citizen of the Republic of Ireland. Not only that, it is a resident in or has a local connection with the constituency and is registered on the electoral register for the constituency. A person is not allowed to vote more than one time in the same parliament constituency or vote in more than one constituency. The eligibility of the candidates, which is a person under age of 18, the Electoral Administration Act 2016, Section 7 that reduced the age of qualifications for elections to the House of Commons or local authority and the elections to the Mayor and the London Assembly members of the Greater London Authority from 21 to 18. Meanwhile, in Malaysia, the Malaysian Parliament has approved of a new legal amendment to lower the voting age to 18 on the 16th July, that adding around 1.5 million young voters to the electoral rolls. Malaysia was previously one of the few countries that requires citizenship to be 21 years old to vote. The amendment also includes the provisions for automatic voters registration and measure that would make candidates eligible to stand for election once they reach at the age of 18. These make the bills the first to enjoy the multi-partisan support in Malaysia, as 211 MPs from the 222-seat parliament across both the ruling Pakatan Harapan coalitions and the opposition, the Parti UMNO and Parti Islam Malaysia, which is known as PARS, which is voted in favor of it. Datuk Seri Ismail bin Bakar, Chief Secretary in the Malaysia government, explained the right to vote is the right for all Malaysians.
Hello everyone, my name is Samantha. and I'll be covering the merits and demerits of Vote 18 Malaysia. On July 16, 2019, the Dewan Rakyat passed the Constitutional Amendment Bill 2019, which reduces the voting age in national and state elections from the current 21 years to 18 years and to automatically register voters. Were greeted with the widespread acclaim. This is a constitutional amendment which permits young voters registration by lowering the voting age for Malaysian citizens to contest in federal and state elections. One of the rationales behind the Vote 18 was to widen representation. With the bill passed, many more people will be represented in government. In the early days of democracy, citizens directly participated in governance. However, with an increased population, that is no longer possible, and that is why some people are therefore allowed to vote at 18, which then many more people would be involved in choosing the leaders. A leader then would truly represent the majority of the people, and the lowering of the voting age from 21 years to 18 years is uncontroversial in that it enlarges political franchise for citizens. With the Vote 18, Malaysia has also conformed to international standards. About 80% of the countries in the world have 18 years as the threshold voting age, and many countries lowered the voting age from 21 to 18 after the 1960s. A person above the age of 18 is often officially considered an adult, and in Article 1 of United Nations Conventions on the Rights of the Child defines children as a person up to the age of 18. In Malaysia, the Age of Majorities Act 1971 sets 18 years old as the age of majority and the adulthood threshold. Malaysia will also see a significant increase in the size of the voter base, as voting usually takes place once every 5 years. A new cohort of voters covering a 5-year age interval is added to the electoral roll. For example, based on population statistics, the number of new voters who are eligible to vote in GE14 was around 2.6 million, of 14% of the number of voters. Based on official estimates, the voter base is expected to increase by 52.3% from 14.9 million voters in GE14 to 22.7 million voters by 2023. The Vote 18 also encourages youth to voice and speak up. A voter is a mighty thing. A single voter has decided elections, and a single voter has led to sweeping social change. This wider enfranchisement implies the democratic benefits of greater participation, political accountability, and more responsive policy making, and allows the youth to develop a sense of responsibility to vote, alongside understanding the importance of voting and their ability to do so. However, this development seems to have exacerbated the long-existing problem in Malaysia of malapportionment, which refers to unequal political representation arising from large disparities in the six of electoral constituencies. In the Malaysian context, the BN had long benefited from its dominance over the smaller rural constituencies, winning more seats even if they performed poorly in the larger. Underrepresentation urban constituencies, the CA 2019, which is the Constitutional Amendment, has apparently aggravated this phenomenon because the new young voters tend to be located in urban areas. Overall, malapportionment in Malaysia has worsened to its highest level in history, making it the 13th worst malapportionment country in the world, behind all its regional democratic counterparts. The large small constituencies ratio in West Malaysia has now increased by 11.45% on average. The most extreme example is Bangi and Lenggong, where the electoral size of the former is 8 times the latter. 3 effects follow from this severe malapportionment, namely violation of fair electoral principles, poor welfare outcomes, and lower inclination to vote in the supersized underrepresented constituencies. Politicians have a higher incentive to devote attention and resources to the smaller rural constituencies, where individual voters count more towards electoral outcomes. Voters in large urban constituencies will see their votes as less consequential and become less inclined to turn out for voting. Since young voters are more numerous in the urban areas, this may produce a negative long-term effect of fostering political apathy and cynicism among young citizens. Some critics stated that the Vote 18 would only result to a duplication of votes due to the opinions of their parents and all people they trust. This is due to the fact that children from an early age would trust their parents first and subsequently other people. During that period of time, they are yet to be mature enough to decipher the importance of the advertisement they see on television or on the internet. They may be compelled to lean into the opinions of the people around them, especially on social media. If they make their vote for a leader based on the opinions of other people, social media, or what they hear from their parents, then their vote would not be an independent vote. Ferdinand Marcos Jr., the son of the disgraced Philippines dictator Ferdinand Marcos, won the country's presidential elections in a landslide victory, propelling his family back into power after 36 years. His family was controversial, whereby they were known for their corruption, human rights abuses, arbitrary arrests, and other legal and financial controversies. One of the many reasons how Marcos was able to win was due to the year-long strategic disinformation campaign on social media that helped rehabilitate, even polish, the family's image. Pro-Marcos propaganda has proliferated, from glossy filtered TikToks framing archival images of the Marcos era as amusing, to YouTube videos declaring that there were no martial law arrests. Although 18 years old may look physically matured, this does not equate them to being politically matured to understand the issues of economic and political social implications. For this reason, it may be that 18-year-olds may not have assessed the policies of the politicians more dispassionately as their adult counterparts would have done. This may lead to political choices that may not reflect these issues on the ground.
Hello, my name is Idil Adam, and I'll be speaking about the two potential reforms to Malaysian electoral system. Firstly, Malaysia's election system has been the topic of constant discussion and also revision. Our discussion will look into two potential electoral system improvements for Malaysia: the enactment of preferential voting system and campaign funding reform, respectively. These changes have various pros and cons, and they can significantly impact the country's democratic processes. To begin with, preferential voting systems such as single transferable vote, also known as STV, or ranked choice voting, also known as RCV, urge candidates to appeal to a more wider range of voters. Candidates would need to establish consensus and gain second or even a third decision, which would lead to a more moderate and inclusive campaign strategies. Preferential voting can help reduce the issue of vote splitting, which would often contribute to the wasted vote issue. This ensures that voters' choices are represented more accurately in the final election results. Preferential voting improves the probability of a major victory by requiring a candidate to receive more than 50% of the vote, reducing the possibility of minority or plurality governments. Well, so how does it work? Well, if there's a procedure for an elimination for single transferable vote, let's say if a candidate wins more votes than is required to be elected, or if a candidate is unlikely to win, their excess votes are allocated equally to voters' second choices. This procedure is repeated until all seats are filled. In ranked choice voting, the candidate with the fewest first choice votes is removed if no candidate obtains an absolute majority, which is more than 50% of first choice votes. Their votes are moved to the next favorite of the voters, and this procedure is repeated until a candidate receives a majority of the votes. Despite the benefits, the preferential voting method does also have its limitations. The primary problem is the possible difficulty of the voting process and counting, which may need significant voter education in addition to new infrastructure. Furthermore, preferential voting can end up in longer ballot sheets, which could prove overwhelming for some voters and provide difficulties with administration. The implementation of a preferential voting system in Malaysia could result in far-reaching consequences, as it would encourage more inclusive and reasonable campaigning, reduce vote splitting, and raise the chances of majority wins. However, the system's details may offer administrative issues and demand large voter education activities. The second reform, which is campaign finance, would solve concerns with political campaign funding and offer various benefits. So for starters, it would reduce the effect of money in politics, so leveling the playing field for the candidates and political parties. This will ensure that the elections are decided more on the foundation of the quality of ideas and projects than on financial resources. Second, campaign finance might increase transparency by requiring candidates and political parties to disclose their funding resources and campaign expenditures. This would boost public confidence in the political process. Reforming campaign funding is not without difficulties. One source of worry is the potential for unforeseen consequences, such as driving campaign money underground or even making it more difficult for new and independent candidates to enter politics. The enforcement of supervision of campaign funding restrictions may be difficult and very time-consuming. Campaign finance reform would have an important impact on Malaysia's election system. It would diminish the influence of money in politics, definitely, improve transparency, and promote grassroots engagement. However, the potential unexpected consequences and the need for effective enforcement are essential concerns to address. Limiting the role of money may have many campaign finance form ideas attempt to reduce the political party of rich individuals, companies, and even interest organizations. Caps on individual and organizational donations to political candidates and campaigns may be implemented. Both the implementation of preferential voting system and campaign funding reform offer major benefits while also posing a certain problem. The change chosen should be in line with Malaysia's democratic objectives as well as the unique demands and interests of its varied citizens. To ensure that the electoral system remains fair, inclusive, and sensitive to all viewpoints of the Malaysian people, it must be evaluated and improved on a regular basis. Transparency is also a critical component of campaign financing reform. This includes requiring politicians and campaigns to disclose their contributors and expenditures so that voters may see who is sponsoring the candidates they support.
Hello, my name is Gugu, and I'll be talking about the merits and demerits of the 2017 bill, which is the Vote 16. The Representation of the People, Young People's Enfranchisement and Education Bill of 2017 and 2019 is a private member bill that was introduced by Labour MP Jim McMahon and sponsored by Lord Adonis. The bill would reduce the voting age to 16 for the UK parliamentary elections and all local elections in England. In Scotland and Wales, 16 and 17-year-olds can vote in devolved elections, but not in the UK parliamentary elections. The bill contains one substantive clause that would amend the Representation of the People Act 1983. Section 1 of the 1983 Act would be amended to reduce the voting age for parliamentary elections from 18 to 16. The bill would also amend Section 2 of the 1983 Act to lower the voting age for local government elections from 18 to 16. Lord Adonis said that voting in any referendum should be extended to 16 and 17-year-olds because there is no group whose future is more at stake. There have been several other calls for reduction in voting age from 18 to 16, and those include the Vote at 16 campaigns launched in 2003 by a coalition of political parties, pressure groups, and charities. Campaigners stated that making 16 and 17-year-olds vote would have several positive effects. Engaging 16 and 17-year-olds who would hold responsibilities in society at the ballot would empower them through a democratic right to influence decisions that would define their future. Extending the right to vote to 16 would allow a smooth transition from learning about voting to putting into practice. The next generation of voters are the first to have received citizenship, education, yet they are being denied their full rights as citizens. This is the first generation to have ever needed to study democracy, the electoral system, and the importance of voting. Lowering the voting age to 16 would allow a smooth transition from learning about voting, elections, and the democracy to putting such knowledge into practice. It was stated that 16 and 17-year-olds have higher rates of turnout than 18 to 24-year-olds, with 25% voting and 95% saying that they will vote in future elections. They access more information from a wider variety of sources than any other age group. Some put forward the argument that 16 and 17-year-olds lack the maturity to vote. However, at that age, they are allowed to join the army, drive, change their name, and order their own passport. If they are able to take on these responsibilities, then they should be trusted to research and understand which political party to vote for. However, the government's 2018 general election manifesto contained a commitment to maintain the voting age at 18, stating that this was in line with the age of gaining full citizenship rights. The government continues to believe that the voting age should remain aligned with the age of majority at 18, as this is the point at which many key rights and obligations as a citizen are acquired, and it is in line with international comparators. It is also argued that a vast majority of 16 and 17-year-olds are not interested in politics. The younger the demographic, the less of a chance of individual voting. Yes, this is the first generation to study democracy, the electoral system, and importance of voting, but if it takes 2 years to truly understand the subject of government and politics in A-levels, then it shows that being able to vote is a huge responsibility and takes a long time to gain a strong understanding of whom to vote for. Those under 18 are usually in full-time education and live with their parents, meaning that they are not full citizens and fully educationally developed. Most 16 and 18-year-olds have no concern for politics. Voting at 16 would force adult responsibilities onto children and young people. Adolescence should be the time where young people can concentrate on school and personal development without having to carry political weight. 18 to 24-year-olds are already the least likely to vote, so 16-year-olds would most likely be the same, leading to an even lower turnout. As voters who do not vote in their first eligible election are the most unreliable voters, this could create a generation of unreliable abstaining voters.
Hi, my name is Harriet Kodoe, and I would like to talk about the introduction of reforms in the United Kingdom. So, since the Second World War, no government has been elected with a majority of votes, leading Liberal Democrats to speak out for reform for years. It is maintained that the current government and the structure of the legislature as a whole mass represents the interests of the electorate. It may be claimed that under such an agreement, the government would have the authority to carry out its elections mandates. A reassessment in a radical politics would result from administrations realizing that a small majority in the parliament and perhaps the power would be held by the third party. Some extreme initiatives would have been amended. Under the current system, there is unfairness in the allocation of votes among the parties. The Liberal Democrats receive roughly 25% of the popular vote in general elections, although this does not transfer into a corresponding similar number of parliamentary seats. This is due to the fact that votes for the Liberal Democrats are divided fairly equally across the United Kingdom and not centered in a single geographic area. The United Kingdom has a north-south electoral split, with the Labour Party holding a majority of seats in the north and the Conservatives leading the seats in the south. The simple majority system, in general, but not always, generate a government with a strong parliamentary, a great deal that is able to carry out its electoral program without undue delay. One of the most significant consequences of this result is that the minority parties with few seats and relatively small electoral support may hold a disproportionate amount of power, making governments dependent on the wishes of minority parties in order to implement the legislative agenda. Governments are also not vulnerable to defeats on confidence resolutions, resulting in political uncertainty and the possibility of repeated elections. To govern, the government may have to make commitments. The voters understand what he is receiving in terms of policies and legislative measures. There are also concerns about how a reformed system may affect the content of collective ministerial responsibility. Accordingly, where a decision has been made by the cabinet and each member of the cabinet and non-cabinet ministers, as well as all their parliamentary confidential secretaries, the rule requires that they hold to the decision and to not speak out against it. Such a show of unity would be difficult to sustain in governments. The implementation of any type of proportional representation might result in governments being less unified and, as a result, less commanding of people's trust. Regardless of the amount of votes cast in an election, a member of parliament, once elected and regardless of political party, represents all of his or her constituents in parliament. Constituencies are tiny and members of parliament are available to voters through appointments and other forms of communication. A member's ability to obtain a deep working knowledge of a religion becomes more difficult, perhaps resulting in a member being less successful in his representation of the constituency in parliament. The Jenkins Commission issued its findings in October 1998, recommending an alternative. The Commission chose a hybrid system comprised of alternative votes and regional list of systems in order to keep single-member constituencies while also injecting a greater degree of proportionality into the system. Constituency members would be elected using the alternative vote method and make up 80 to 85% of the membership, with the remaining 15 to 20% elected from a regional list. Greater proportionality would be accomplished while maintaining the customary strong bond between a member and his or her constituency. Thank you.
Lowering the voting age of 16 years old has its merit and demerit. But it can be a way to engage the empowered young citizen. But however, it's important that to address the potential challenges such as education and maturity. So additionally, both Nigeria and the UK could benefit from the electoral system reform, including this ensuring the independence in election administration campaign, finance regulation, adopting the proportional representations, and simplifying the voters' registration. So this reform can enhance the fairness, inclusivity, the transparency of the electoral process in both countries. So in both Malaysia and the UK, there is a need for a broader electoral system reform to enhance the fairness and the transparency of the electoral process. So this reform should focus on the Electoral Commission independence, campaign finance regulations, adopting the proportional representation, and simplify the voters' registration. So this will contribute to strengthen the democratic system in both countries by ensuring the fair representation, transparency, and increased participation in the electoral process. That's all from us. Thank you.